Welcome to Movie Recall. In today's video, we will be going through the 2020 movie, The Invisible Man. It's time to recall. Let's get started. Turn on subtitles and spoilers ahead. Cecilia awakens unexpectedly in the middle of the night. She climbs out of bed, careful not to disturb her husband Adrian, and goes to the medication she's concealed beneath the bed. As she walks out of the bedroom, he twitches slightly in his sleep and startles her. She seemed to be terrified of disturbing him. Cecilia walks quietly and slowly to the dressing room, where she fills a duffel bag with clothing and stuffs the medication inside. She then directs the hallway camera toward her sleeping husband and checks to see whether it's functioning so she can monitor him. She enters a room that appears to be a laboratory and disables the house cameras and alarm. Any noise she makes frightens her, and she looks at the camera to see whether he's awake. She hastily dresses and exits the house through the garage. Zeus the dog follows her out and at first terrifies her. She removes his electronic collar when the dog activates the vehicle alarm, and Cecilia dashes towards the fence. As she climbs over, the light in the bedroom flicks on. She rushes through the woods until she reaches a road where she waits for her sister Emily to pick her up. She seems scared after more than a moment. Cecilia finally gets in the car as her sister arrives. Her spouse emerges behind her, yelling after her and smashing the glass. They leave, but he discovers her diazepam on the ground. Cecilia is at a friend's house 2 weeks later, James. She is still terrified of going outdoors, but he persuades her to go to the mailbox. When she starts to open it, she is startled by a man running and rushes back inside. The following day, her buddy is making some house renovations, and Cecilia is covering her computer camera when the doorbell rings. Emily has arrived at the front door. Cecilia is concerned because she believes her spouse has followed her there. Her sister, on the other hand, has some exciting news. She shows her an item on her phone that says her spouse is no longer alive. Cecilia doesn't know how. She informs James and Emily about how he would manipulate her, from her appearance to the way she spoke and thought. His abuse extended beyond physical violence. Cecilia is able to leave the house more readily the next day. She receives the letters on her own and is commended for her efforts by her buddy and his daughter Sydney. One of the letters is addressed to her, according to James. Cecilia and Emily are later seen at a legal office. Adrian's lawyer brother announced the deceased's final instructions, which include a $5 million bequest to Cecilia on the condition that she never face criminal charges or be labeled mentally disturbed. That night, she surprises Sydney and James with a present, thanking them for taking good care of her. James gets a giant letter and Sydney a bank account with enough money to go to a fashion school. They celebrate, and then Cecilia goes to her room. She keeps having the feeling that someone is watching her. The next morning, James leaves for work and asks Cecilia to wake Sydney up. She does just that while leaving the stove on. The breakfast catches fire and the girl put it out with a fire extinguisher. Later that day, Cecilia is alone at the house, but she senses something strange and goes to investigate. She looks through the entire house and finds nothing when suddenly she hears the front door of the house open. Cecilia checks the entrance. There's no one there, but she still feels strange. Suddenly, a second breath can be seen next to her. That same night, Cecilia and Sydney are sleeping in Sydney's room. Suddenly, something pulls their covers off and starts playing with the light in the room, waking Cecilia. She thinks she sees someone in the room briefly, but realizes it's just Sydney's mannequin. She then goes to pick up the covers from the floor and thinks that there is someone sitting in the chair next to her, so she throws the covers at it. There's no one. She pulls on the covers, but they don't move. When she looks at them, it's as if someone is standing on them. Cecilia calls for James, waking Sydney in the process, and he rushes into the room. Since neither he nor his daughter sees anybody, they try to calm her down by telling her not to let Adrian's memories haunt her. Cecilia is attending a job interview. As they settle down, the interviewer flirts with her, but when he notices that she is frightened, he requests to examine her work. Cecilia opens the bag to find her work missing. She becomes really agitated and collapses. James is in the hospital with her as the doctor instructs her to take it easy till her blood results come in. Cecilia is in the shower when the phone rings. When she answers the phone, it's her doctor telling her that the cause of her fainting is excessive amounts of diazepam in her system. Cecilia notices a diazepam bottle on the bathroom sink. It bears a bloodied fingerprint. Cecilia afterward took James with her to see Adrian's brother. She tells them about the diazepam bottle, claiming Adrian placed it there, but the brother dismisses her. Then she claims that she doesn't believe he's dead, claiming that he's discovered a technique to be invisible and that she's certain his brother is aware of it. Adrian's brother is unimpressed and James is taken aback. He claims that his brother tortured him by entering his mind as well. He shows her a picture of Adrian's dead body and tells her that his brother's death relieved him as well. Cecilia visits Emily and they have an unpleasant talk during which her sister informs her that she read her terrible email about how she thinks about her. Cecilia informs her that Adrian, not she, sent the email. Emily does not believe her and advises her to seek professional assistance. Cecilia checks her email sent items that night and discovers the one to Emily. Sydney enters and finds her sobbing on the floor. They decide to head out after a few words of comfort. Something smacks Sydney as she stands up. She quickly summons her father, believing Celia has done this to her. She can't persuade the two of them that it wasn't her who hit the girl, so they leave her alone in the house. Cecilia realizes Adrian is nearby and begins yelling for him. She takes a bag of coffee and spreads it across the floor of one of the rooms, putting herself on the other end of the room from the entrance. She talks to Adrian, convinced he is present, and begs to be left alone. She gets the bright idea to call his phone, and when it rings, she can hear it through the ceiling. Celia climbs to the ceiling and starts looking for him but sees no one. She calls the phone again and goes in its direction, where she finds Adrian's keys, a knife, and her design work. There's a noise behind her, so she grabs a piece of paint and throws it at the opening of the ceiling, suddenly showing the contours of a man. She gets down from the ceiling and looks for him when she hears the water running in the kitchen. The sink is full of paint. An invisible hand grabs and lifts her abruptly. It throws her around the house and they fight. It chases after her and it tries to strangle her, but she fights it off and runs out of the house. Cecilia manages to get an Uber and asks him to take her to the house where she lived with Adrian. They get to the house and she asks the Uber to wait. Cecilia walks inside and is joined by Zeus. The dog follows her to the basement laboratory, where she heads straight to one of the gadgets. She tries to figure out what it is by looking at a tablet strapped to the wall and succeeds in deactivating the gadget, slowly revealing an invisibility suit. Cecilia is taking the suit off the mannequin when the dog barks and runs towards something, alerting her that there's someone else in the house. Cecilia goes to hide in the dressing room and the bedroom, but is followed by the invisible man. He opens the door but ironically doesn't see her immediately. She runs away as the dog barks at him. While in the Uber, she calls Emily asking to meet her that night. Cecilia waits for her sister in a restaurant, nervously looking at the empty chair. When Emily arrives, she tells her about what she found in Adrian's house that would prove he's still alive. Suddenly, a knife is floating in midair, killing Emily. In the next moment, it's in Cecilia's hand. A patron in the restaurant screams and everyone freaks out, moving away from her. Cecilia is pinned down and arrested. She's taken to an asylum, screaming that she didn't do it. Staring at the empty corners of the room, she says that Adrian killed her sister and that she knows he's there. She's sedated and left alone. Footsteps are heard heading towards her, and the words, "Surprise!" James and another detective are interrogating Cecilia. She says she has proof about Adrian, but that she can't tell them what it is because he's in the room and they can't see him. The other detective leaves and she asks James if he believes her. She says she feels guilty, but James feels guilty in his own way too. Later, Cecilia is talking to a doctor who tells her that she's pregnant and that it happened sometime in the last month. The next day, Adrian's brother comes to see her in the asylum. He's there to tell her that since she's been brought up on criminal charges and potentially ruled mentally incompetent, she's lost the right to Adrian's money. She belittles him, comparing him to his narcissist sociopath brother. He tells her that she has two options: to sign the document and forfeit the money, or to have the baby and go back to Adrian. He offers her a new life with Adrian in one phone call. She refuses and steals one of his pens while he isn't looking. He tells her that he'll come back in 3 days for her final decision. Later that night, after the orderly checks Cecilia's room thoroughly and leaves, she goes in the shower. She takes the pen and she starts to cut into her veins, says, "You won't get the baby." Suddenly, the invisible man grabs her hand and she stabs him with the pen repeatedly. The security guard walks in but sees the damaged suit. He goes to shock the invisible man, but then he turns the stun gun back on the guard. Cecilia runs but is quickly stopped by 2 guards. They're taking her back to her room and the man appears again, killing them. More keep coming and suffer the same fate one by one, completely unaware of what's happening to them. After killing the last guard on that floor, the man drops the gun. Cecilia runs after him and takes it. She chases him to the stairwell and shoots after him. They both leave the facility and go outside in the pouring rain. Cecilia is looking for him with the gun in hand. She hears a noise and goes after it while security guards are after her too. Close to her is an open trunk, so she approaches it, assuming he's hiding there. He grabs her suddenly and starts strangling her, telling her that if she doesn't comply, he'll hurt the ones she loves, like Sydney. Cecilia goes after him again, but when she gets outside of the fence, the invisible man speeds towards her with his car while she shoots at him, causing another car to crash. Cecilia steals that car and goes after him again relentlessly. While driving, she calls James and tells him to go back to the house and protect Sydney. The invisible man arrives at the house and goes into her room. She wakes up and gets the pepper spray out of her bag. Since she can hear him moving, she sprays him and he falls over. She runs away screaming, but the man grabs her. At that moment, James arrives at the house, so the man just starts attacking him instead. Sydney begs him to stop beating up her dad when suddenly Cecilia arrives and blasts him with a fire extinguisher, then shoots him dead. She goes over to the body and takes off the mask, only to reveal that it was Adrian's brother. As calls for aid are heard from inside Adrian's residence, a tactical police squad is seen passing through it. Adrian is tied up when the cops break down a cellar wall. Later, James tells Cecilia how he was discovered, but she is skeptical that he was his brother's victim. James attempts to persuade her, but she feels Adrian set up his brother, making her feel insane. She returns to the residence that night. He's looking forward to seeing her. She, on the other hand, is not as delighted to see him. They settle down for dinner, and he tries to be open with her, apologizing and telling her that he's learned his lesson. She wants him to confess what he did, but he insists that his brother was manipulating him. Cecilia insists on his entry, and James stands outside the house, listening to everything the two discuss. Adrian comes over to soothe her as she is crying, but then reverts to his dominating methods. Cecilia goes to the toilet to clean herself off, and he is seen at the table waiting for her. He feels restless after she has been gone for a bit and kills himself. Cecilia returns a few moments later and quickly calls the emergency services. She pulls away in the security camera's blind zone, sits down, and watches him die. After hearing what occurred, James rushes towards the home and discovers Cecilia fleeing. She tells him Adrian committed suicide, but James notices the outfit in her duffel bag and wonders whether she planned it all along. Cecilia does not explicitly address the question. She exits the house, leaving everything behind. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new movie recaps.